One very early memory I have is sitting on the floor of the closet in my childhood bedroom. I think it was past my bedtime. The light is on in the closet, creating a small space of light amidst the darkness of the big room. My mom is there with me on the floor, reading to me from the instruction booklet of Kirby's Dream Land for the Game Boy, that old gray brick with the greenish colored screen. It's been a long time since I thought about playing that game. Looking at the date it was published, I must have been about 3 years old, the same year I started attending preschool. I remember thinking how big a number 3 was, or how big a concept it was. I couldn't write yet, that wouldn't be until kindergarten at Pelham Road Elementary, but I already had some vague sense of the scope of time. 3 years was a lot. Plenty years. I'm visualizing. That weird, white puff Kirby. My mom remembers him as like a cloud, and that's how he was on the cover of the game box and the instruction book that she read to me from. I remember that there must have been some sort of story in there that had intrigued me and made me insist she read it to me. The story went along with the game, though the game itself hardly explained any of it to you. Kirby's Dream Land was a purely visual game, minimal reading comprehension required. I searched around hoping to find a PDF of the old instruction booklet, but the best I could find is what seems to be an exact text transcript, with little tags standing in for the images. Here's a segment from the beginning. On a tiny star, somewhere far, far away from Earth, there is a very special place known as Dreamland. The Dreamlanders are a very happy people who use their magical sparkling stars to play and work among the heavens. That is, until one night, when the gluttonous King Dedede and his rotten band of thieves swooped down from neighboring Mount Dedede for a midnight snack in Dreamland. Not only did they steal all their food, but they stole the Dreamlanders' treasured sparkling stars as well. Because the Dreamlanders didn't have the sparkling stars to gather food anymore, they began to get very hungry. Suddenly, a spry little boy named Kirby happened along and said, "Don't worry, I'll get your food and your sparkling stars back." With these words, Kirby set off on his quest toward the dreaded Mount Dedede. We wish him luck. My research has revealed to me that this was the first game in the Kirby series, and thus the first ever appearance of Kirby as a character. The game was designed by Masahiro Sakurai at HAL Laboratory, who intended for Kirby's Dream Land to be a simple game that could be played by beginning gamers. This information resonated with me. I felt like I had been there for Kirby since the very beginning, and in a way he was there for me. He was designed for beginning gamers. We had been great companions. The game Kirby Superstar for the Super Nintendo console, featuring 8 different Kirby games on one cartridge, provided uncountable hours of fun for me and my sister. The truly neat thing about Superstar was that it was 2 players. One person controlled Kirby, and the other person manifested as friendly versions of the enemies encountered throughout the games. My sister had her favorites to play as, and sometimes I would mess with her by transforming her into one of her less favorites. But even in those instances, we had fun. We had voices for all the characters and had invented our own stories describing the relationships between them and Kirby. I could talk for ages about our Kirby days. But at a certain point, I stopped caring about Kirby. He was replaced by other characters with whom I liked to identify. There are many, many Kirby games that have been released since 1992, and I've only played a few. At a certain point, the simplicity of the games, which had originally enabled me to play Kirby, became unappealing. I remember playing Kirby 64, the Crystal Shards, in the year 2000, when I was in 5th grade, and thinking it was way too easy, and being a touch disappointed at the overall experience. Looking back, I realize gamers go through phases. There's a time for learning the game, for exploring the world and seeing new sights, and then there's a time for challenging oneself. This dynamic is something I'll have to research further. I knew I had to go back to the beginning and play the original Kirby's Dream Land again. I no longer had the old gray brick Game Boy. Indeed, my current Game Boy was the 3DS, so many technological generations ahead of that original machine that it hardly resembled its ancestor at all, sporting 2 HD screens with touch sensitivity, camera, joystick, shoulder buttons, etc. Still, it didn't take me long to locate a $3.99 copy on Nintendo's eShop and download it to my 3DS. Immediately, upon hearing the title screen music, I experienced a state of bliss. I just had to sit back and soak it all in. Little Kirby's dancing across the screen, putting on a little parade for me as the MIDI track played, evoking childhood car trips where my Game Boy and a pack of fresh batteries were always a necessity. I played through the levels again with new eyes. There were only 5 of them: Green Greens, Castle Low Low Low, Float Islands, Bubbly Clouds, and Mount DDD. I die a surprising number of times getting there, especially in Bubbly Clouds. Considering this is a game I was able to beat as a toddler, I am extra determined to finish without losing all my lives. And I do. The satisfaction I feel upon delivering the final blow to King DDD is difficult to describe in words. That moment used to make my sister and I laugh. As I play, I think about what the designer, Masahiro Sakurai, was thinking when he created these levels. Where is his Korra? What are his punctums? I imagine the environments as hidden shrines, especially the final ascent in Bubbly Clouds where you see Olympian columns and ornate pavilions with silken drapes. This is a dreamland, but whose dreams? Certainly, this place became a stage, the scene, for my sister and my childhood play, where we were still on the floor of my childhood bedroom, yet, at the same time, in an entirely different dimension. This is what has led me to my interest in game studies. I used to think I wanted to be a game designer, and thought that meant something very specific, but now I realize it isn't. It's as broad as saying I want to be a writer, or I want to be a musician. Anna Anthropy, in her book Rise of the Video Game Zinesters, relates her experiences trying to break into game design. She found it to be a boys' club dominated by an insulary, exclusionary culture, white male engineers, code monkeys, who shared common interests and supported each other's projects. This is a problem I believe I can address, and I can do it from outside the mainstream video game industry. In fact, I must be outside of it. Being outside of it is the only way I realize now that I can try to save it. And I know it sounds dramatic to put it in these terms, but I do sense that this is a critical time for video games. We're talking about creating visceral experiences. They can be about any subject. As a player, you can be positioned as anything. Think about that. Think about the things that could happen in a game and realize that they probably already have. And if they haven't, they will. Players make choices. I believe that the act of playing can be understood as an act of writing, and that with each press of a button the player writes their own experience of the game. This is how my story is written.